invite Professor Elena Konstantinidou and Professor Konstantin Moraitis, a couple of presentations sustained by two distinguished architects from Greece. Professor Elena Konstantinidou is architect with a master in architecture, design, space, and culture. Research interests are concentrated in the area of recognition, protection, and enhancement of cultural heritage. 30 years of professional experience focusing on architectural design and construction. Projects include residences and houses in traditional settlements, urban residential complexes, surveying and building restoration. And Professor Konstantinos Moraitis with the presentation Cultural Landscapes and Heritage Conservation in Mountains, the Case of Arcadia. Professor Moraitis is also architect, PhD in architecture and landscape architecture. Research interests are concentrated on the area of theory and methodology of architectural design, philosophy of culture, philosophy of aesthetics. 40 years of professional experience focusing on architectural, urban, and landscape design and construction. He has more than 33 projects, 2 of them in international competition with prize distinctions. Please, Professor Elena Konstantinidou.
Yes, hello to everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Hasrat, for the invitation. We are very honored to participate in this international event, let's say. So along with my colleague, Konstantinos Moraitis, we are going to present, sorry, I have to share my screen. Wait 1 minute, please. It's okay? You can see it?
Yes, I can see it, but
okay.
Please, full screen. Okay.
So this presentation refers to mountain, excuse me, we are going to talk about mountain identity and development aspirations. The presentation refers to management issues of mountainous areas. As you all heard before, we are architects, we are teachers in architecture, okay? We come from the National Technical University of Greece. So the emphasis of these presentations will be on the built environment, highlighting identity as a key element for development perspectives and aspirations. Mountain areas are addressed as a system, a comprehensive system, the identity of which we ought to recognize in terms of protection, promotion, and integrated development. The concept of identity will be explored through the elements that constitute mountain settlements, the conditions of recognition, protection, and promotion, and reference will also be made to the concept of construction of identity and its relation to the development process. We will also talk about the concept of tradition, the cultural and economic importance of its preservation, tangible and intangible, and culture as a key pillar of integrated development. In this context, key issues concerning development aspirations relate to the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats of the mountainous areas, the relation between integrated protection and sustainable development, and also the strategies of creating and implementing a management plan for the preservation, protection, and development. And tool for this presentation is a course on identity and development prospects of mountain areas within the framework of the postgraduate program Environment and Development of Mountains Regions. I believe Dr. Hasrat invited us because we are teaching in this program, and you are all invited to join us and work with us. And this program is the only one that studies mountain regions in Greece, which cover more than 700 of the country's total area. I know that everybody thinks that Greece is the islands, but it's mountains and very interesting mountains. So the aim is the study of the specific issues and opportunities presented in the mountainous areas based on multidisciplinary education and offering students the opportunity not only to study, but to live in the mountain regions. And we, the teachers, live with them during our lessons in a very interesting village in Epirus, which is called Metsovio. And this is the school. The Metsovio Interdisciplinary Research Center in Metsovio, which is an interdepartmental laboratory of the National Technical University of Athens, a research center for mountainous environments and the local structures. Now, we should start with some basic for us definitions. First of all, cultural heritage. Cultural heritage is an expression of the ways of living developed by a community and passed on from generation to generation, including customs, practices, places, objects, artistic expressions, and values. It contains visible and tangible traces from antiquity to the recent past, and it is often expressed as either intangible or tangible cultural heritage. It shapes our identities and everyday lives and has a universal value for us as individuals, communities, and societies. It is important to preserve and pass on to future generations. And it is distinguished in built environment, natural environment, artifacts, and of course, intangible heritage, traditions, storytelling, religious ceremony, etc. Another important term and definition is landscape. According to the European Landscape Convention in Florence in 2000, landscape is part of the land as perceived by local people or visitors, which evolves through time as a result of being acted upon by natural forces and human beings. And each landscape forms a blend of components and structures, types of territories, social perceptions, and ever-changing natural, social, and economic forces. And once this identification work has been completed and the landscape quality objectives set, the landscape can be protected, managed, or developed. And as I told you before, as you heard before, we are architects, so architectural heritage is something that connects very much with our interest, and it consists not only of the most important monuments, but also includes the group of lesser buildings in characteristic village and their natural or man-made settings. So it's an expression of history and help us to understand the relevance of the past to contemporary life. The concept of tradition was firstly formed in correlation to the concept of the folk culture during the end of the 18th century and afterward as a reaction to the centralized European. In contradiction to the accelerated speed of progress of the Southern European countries that destroyed primordial values, European Romantism proposed the respect to the age-long existence of the tradition and the folk culture, in many ways associated to the sublime nature. Now, contemporary theoretical criticism associates the concept of tradition with the formation of the concept of nations and the creation of the neoteric nation states. Social groups which may claim to possess a genuine ethnic identity that survive unalerted from centuries may demand a differentiated nationality and thus the formation of a nation state. In this way, tradition was many times invented in order to compensate pressures exerted by other ethnic groups. Nevertheless, even in the territory of the Eastern Mediterranean, where historic changes continuously transform social and cultural contexts, we could not discard cultural formations which seem to survive for centuries. And also the word tradition itself derives from the Latin tradere, literally meaning to transmit, to hand over, to keep for safekeeping. Identity may be regarded as the sum of the inherent characteristics of a social group and of all the possible tendencies of its future development that have to be recognized, amplified, and promoted. And it is in the same way that we analyze the identity of a place, recognizing its inherent characteristics and its possible tendencies as well. Place identity and its promotion are usually described under the place branding and thus correlated to the economic development of the place and the local societies, to its touristic appeal and the expansion of its consumative character. Place identity and its promotion or place branding have central cultural and political importance as they may strengthen the place pride of the inhabitants, the feeling that they live in a place of local interest that has to preserve its important qualities, correct its inadequacies, and insist on its future opportunities of development. Getting back to Greece, I told you before that 70% of the Greek's land is mountainous, despite the 2,000 islands, okay? So you should come to Greece. It's a very interesting country. So the mountains landscape of the country is formed by small settlements, but large number, a lot of settlements, and with variety. And they are located over a large geographical area, often isolated from each other due to geomorphological constraints and lack of communication infrastructure. And the issue of identity is central in the management of mountainous areas. I told you in the very beginning of this presentation, that mountain areas are treated as a single system, the identity of which we must recognize in terms of protection, promotion, and integrated development. And this identity consists of the physical, the spatial, and the cultural human elements. Concerning the physical elements include the landscape, the geographical elements, the climate, the flora, the fauna, the topography, the morphology of the crowd, the natural relief, orientation, etc. The creation of settlements has been always related to real needs, essential and timeless values as measure, economy, social data. And site selection was always in terms of interconnection with neighboring settlements, of visual communication, of water resources should be close to water resources, to topography, to safety, to climate, sunshine, cultivation, forests for the supply of materials. And in Greece happens all the time, I believe also in your countries, that the settlements located concerning other landmarks and places of significant value. For example, this village we see here in Garditsa, it was mentioned by Homer, okay? And then it was a Byzantine period. There is a Byzantine castle, and we have around the newer contemporary settlements. So we have places that live through centuries. The natural landscape, geomorphology, and relief influence to the maximum extent the creation and development of the settlements. This is Metsovio. It's that village that our university, this center and the lessons of the postgraduate program I mentioned before occur. So settlements are usually located in a way and scale to harmonize with their environment and become elements of natural environment. And this is my mother's village, which is called Langadia, and it is in Peloponnese. It's a very, very nice village with 70% of cliff. It's like this anyway. And also the climate is of great importance for the configuration of the complexes, the forms, but also for the location of the buildings and the free spaces. The construction materials are related to natural materials, and also construction takes advantage of the environmental characteristics. So thus we could talk about biochromatic architecture. The mountain settlements, as you all know, are located in a natural environment with abundance and diversity. The free development of nature, the creation of rich ecosystems, the natural environment exhibits large-scale diversity, high-steep mountains, rivers, rich, varied vegetation, the huge variety of plant organisms, the flora, the fauna. All these form landscapes. Although the way we perceive space is not only visual, the identity of a place is associated with aesthetic qualities, with visual, acoustic, olfactory, tactile, and we can speak beyond the visual landscape in relation to the senses, sound, taste, smell, touch. All these are part of the identity of a place and its physiognomy. Also the color of the place, the scenery in every season that changes, nature is changing, and also the color of the buildings. And all these form the composition feature in the composition in the landscape. It's part of its identity. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the identity of a place consists of the natural elements and of course, and it's very basic, the human data related to social activities, historical, economic, democratic characteristics, and their traces in the field, the current dynamics of the space, the population composition, the structures, the social structures, the economic and productive activities, the cultural elements, and also the spiritual and cultural elements, the genius loci of a place, form part of its identity, which is approached through the process of collective memory, such as actuality, source and myth, narratives concerning the place, literature, filmmaking, painting, photography, etc. Even the name of the place often contains and expresses the history, the tradition, the spatial peculiarities. For example, again, my village, Langadia. In Greece, Lagadi means gorge, ravine, torrent. So this is the village that is a gorge, Langadia. And also the historical identity of a place is composed of the grid of the monuments, of the landmarks, the archaeological sites, the sites associated with historical events, and all these are tied to the collective memory of the inhabitants, and that's it's part, a very, very important part of the identity of a place. And as we said before, we also have, apart from the tangible cultural heritage, is very important the intangible heritage. And also an important element of the identity is the economic activities of the residents, which in some times survive through centuries, like in this village of Stemnitsa above, again in Peloponnese, where we have silversmithing since the Byzantine years until today, and today we also have a school to for gold's silversmithing and goldsmithing. So this is a very characteristic part of the physiognomy of the identity of the place. And also identity relates to built environments. This is the part that it's more interested. We focus in this as architects, but of course now I will only mention it in few words. But what our research focus on the identity of built environment, which relates to the structure and organization of urban space, the typological, morphological, and structural data, and each settlement forms a composition of buildings and free spaces, and important elements are the form and structures of this composition. They are key components of the architectural identity. And special characteristics include the relation of natural and built environments, the structural organization of urban space, the features of buildings and public space, the road and path network that one understands in a settlement, the squares and open spaces, their shape, their character, the main features of their shaping, and also buildings. It's a very important and fundamental factor determining the identity of a place, especially houses, which are the most prevalent type of buildings in the settlements. So elements as scale, volume, proportion, size, material are important part of the identity of the place. It is therefore important to recognize their structure, their shape and form and construction. And of course, we see that in different places we have different kind of typologies and materials, etc. It's a very big discussion about this. The components of the identity of a settlement, as suggested above, through the identification procedure, avail the tools to design and define the parameters for the protection strategy and sustainable development. But of course, there are changes and problems and danger dangers that threaten the mountain settlements, and the basic problem concerns the phenomenon of abandonment that is related to social causes, natural disasters, emergencies, geomorphological causes, and in Greece, the abandonment of mountain settlements between from 50s to 70s is associated with the mass movement of population to cities, resulted in the desertification of mountainous areas, but the majority of abandoned mountain settlements remained, let's say, untouched by interventions and alterations, and there is let's say, a fertile ground through a suitable design for their strengthening or even reuse. But of course, what we are most interested in concerns alive settlements, settlements that still live, and in order to follow contemporary needs, we have a lot of problems and threats, environmental problems, natural disaster, hypertourism, problems that concern the image and contour of a place, the contemporary expansions, the later interventions, the new constructions and additions that are incompatible with existing built environment. But also we have changes and problems and dangers in the intangible elements that constitute the cultural heritage of a place, to the customs and traditions, to traditional techniques and cultural practices that we lose over time, to the functions acquired over time, activities of the inhabitants. All of these facing risks of extinction, alteration, or degradation due to socio-economic changes. This relates to the abandonment of settlements by permanent residents and removal of the economically active population and young people. Introduction of new intensive uses with catastrophic requirements for the scale of the place, occupation of public space and alteration of its form and operation, excessive increase in land prices, degradation of the quality of life. But how to deal with all these problems? We need legislative, administrative measures, results from planning, and also incentives and tools for the activation of the residents. This is very important to involve the residents and make them part of the solution of each problem. Concerning the protection and development planning, the concepts, I believe that we all know that the concepts of protection and development evolved through important international documents, charters, etc., from international organizations like ICOMOS, UNESCO, the Council of Europe, that highlight the values, the threats, and the process of planning their protection, and include principles and strategies, and as I said before, to preserve the values and ensure the quality of life of their inhabitants. You need the social participation and sensitization of the inhabitants. It's a very, very necessary factor. Today, the actions of preservation and protection of cultural property are combined with sustainable development, and the concept of protection is identified with the concept of active development, aiming to integrate mountain settlements into the current reality and also ensuring viability in the future. Protection and development planning presupposes the management of the changes taking place in the settlements We accept reality for change and the need for its management. And the methodology of a sustainable design process should be based on a deep understanding of the identity of the cultural context, its characteristics, mutation, and also its problems. So such a plan should cover all the tangible and intangible elements, ensure and respect the promotion of all values and the historicity of the place, maintain the overall image of the site and the relation between the natural and the built environment, protect the structure, form, and function of the traditional urban fabric, protect the functional character and its socioeconomic identity, and consider and protect the cultural diversity and multiculturalism of a place. It includes administrative measures, social measures, special projects, and legislative measure, and the strategy of management should aim at preserving the cultural heritage of the place, strengthen traditional occupations, evaluate the introduction of foreign standards, providing the inhabitants with the comfort of contemporary life, also attracting investments that do not destroy the environment. Concluding, I hope I am in my time. I should say, mountain settlements areas include several values: aesthetics, memory, cultural, economic, quality of life. The importance of these settlements depends not only on their material status, but also on the traditions and intangible values associated with them. It is therefore necessary to recognize the identity, understand the value systems as total natural, environmental, structural, and man-made qualities before or in order to formulate any proposal for the protection and integrated development. They should live and develop the mountain settlements as living organisms, utilizing their cultural potential, which can bring the necessary resources for their development. The elements of that consist of mountainous settlements can be the necessary resources for the complete and sustainable development: national resources, cultural resources, social environment, intangible heritage. And I finish here by saying that mountain settlements can be based on how can I say, ανάπτυξη, Costa. The development of mountain settlements can be based on their function as a network and perhaps respective types of tourism. And thank you very much for your attention. And finished.
Thank you, Professor, Emeritus Professor Elena Konstantinidou. And now, Professor Moraitis, the floor is yours, please.
Oh, well, it's such a nice experience to have the possibility to communicate with